Welcome to everybody. It's always wonderful, whether we're a small group or large. It's great to just have people coming together to connect deeply around whatever the topics involving AI and humanity are that are up for us. And it's always such a delight to hear each of your insights and the pieces that you're looking at. Again, this is Brenda from the Village, who has such a great capacity for bringing people together to connect through personal story. And we do try to keep things, we can range into the academic side of things a bit, but we really are looking at what are each of our personal experiences and feelings and pieces around the topic. Great to see you joining, David. And then myself from Samazo, where we're looking at bringing people together to work on SDG related projects in kind of an agile way. So this came from Brenda and I talking about the issue and getting fired up around it, and realizing there was a real appetite for just human conversation around topics related to AI, and especially large language models right now. So Brenda, I'll pass things over to you for facilitating and for kind of introducing our topic today. I love where you've sort of put us for today.
Thanks, Daniel. Welcome, everybody. Such a thrill. So much fun to be with you. I feel like we are living in just a wild time. And I think one of the things that we share here is a desire really to dig into what is happening, which sometimes I think of as life as living, breathing art. And we are in it, and it is happening now. So thank you for coming and being willing to dig in. This is a particular topic, Esther Perel's fantastic keynote at the South by Southwest Festival. Before we dig into it, I just want to have very quick introductions, just because we are AI and us, and this is a human conversation about humans in the face of AI. So I'd like to ask just a quick 3 words to describe who you are, and make 3 words to describe about what you care about. And this is not a test. This is just to give us in the moment, who are you and what do you care about right now? So I thought about it before, because it's hard to think while I'm talking. And I thought I usually say things like love and connection and creativity. But today I want to say my 3 words to describe me are I am you. And then the 3 things that I care about, I'm also going to switch it up a little bit today. And I'm going to say that I care about truth and freedom for all, and to tip my hat to Esther Perel, eroticism. Daniel, do you want to go next?
Sure. So many different areas I could say, but the thing I'm swimming in is looking at the topic in terms of implementation. So I will say positive, practical precedent are my 3 words when it comes to this conversation right now.
And think 3 things that you care about.
Yeah, I mean, connection, deepening, and potential.
Nice. Thank you. Sushant.
Hello, everyone. So great to see everyone here. I would say 3 words that probably describes me are transformation, transdisciplinary, and technology. The thing that I really care about is individual freedom, privacy, and creativity. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushant. Carissa.
So 3 words to describe me, I would say community development, life mission, and what's the right word? Intuitive emergence, explorer. And then things I care about, what comes to my heart today: sovereignty, depth, and intimacy.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Reed.
Hello, everybody. So 3 words to describe myself. I'll go with my usual here, where I am a developer, an educator, and creator. So excited to be here. And the 3 words that are really resonating with me today are playfulness, connection, and intention.
And what was the last one?
Intention.
Nice. Thank you. Ricardo.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I was thinking about the words to describe me. It's hard to find them, but I would think about peace, hope, and perseverance. And I'm very interested and I care about connection. I try to live life with curiosity, and I really praise well-being.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And in your work, you do so much of that. Mark.
In 3 words, I am a natural loving presence. And what brings me here would be beauty, truth, and mystery.
Thank you, Mark. So good to have you back. Ihab.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be with you. 3 words that describe me is relaxed, tired, and happy to be here. What I care about doesn't change much, but it's, well, maybe today I would say justice, exploration, and challenging the limits.
Beautiful. Thank you. And you do, Ihab. David, so nice to meet you. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Interested to see where this is going to go. 3 words is difficult for a person like me, so I appreciate the challenge. I would say, to describe me, 3 words: scholar, facilitator, father. And then 3 things I'm interested in: invention, interaction, and interpretation.
Beautiful. Thank you, David. Thank you for scaling it down. Gustavo, hello.
Hi, I'm sorry. Curious, resilient, and enthusiastic. And for the other subject, I think connecting. I don't know if it's correct in English, but trying to look or I mean transcendent. And technology.
Hey, that's what you care about. Technology.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Great to have you here, Gustavo.
Thank you.
Zach, are you here? Would you like to join in?
Yeah.
Sorry, we're asking everybody 3 quick words to describe yourself and 3 things that you care about right now.
And let me think here. I would say persistent.
Zach, it sounds like you might be driving. If it's too much right now, please just feel free to listen.
Yeah. Let me come back to you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, let's dig in. Esther Perel. I need to say something to start, and that is something that I find incredibly fascinating about this woman, and I just almost never hear talked about, and that is that she is a Jewish child of Jewish Holocaust survivors. Both her parents lost their entire families during the war. So I believe her father had 7 siblings, her mother had 9 siblings, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, all, etc. All perished during World War II, and in the concentration camps specifically, I believe. I think that's a really interesting background, and one of the things that I read was that, so she grew up in Antwerp, Belgium, and she said that she later in life started to put people into 2 groups, those who didn't die and those who came back to life. And she said that the survivors that came back to life understood eroticism as an antidote to death. And of course, in this talk, she talks about eroticism at different times, and eroticism as something very messy and not easy to figure out, that's for sure. So there's just so much that she talks about. I just wanted to maybe throw out a couple of quotes and questions, and then ask you guys what you're thinking and what you'd like to dig into. I found it really fascinating, the whole idea of the Esther bot. So AI Esther. And she said something about, well, that's really interesting because suddenly I can be immortal. Right? So that raises that issue. And she was fascinated and flattered by it. But ultimately, her big question is AI Esther better than me? Better than the human Esther? So that's certainly a question that we can dig into. She also says, much of life's challenges are not problems we solve, they are paradoxes that we manage. So when we think about AI, we often think about problems to solve. And the paradox of humanity is, I think, also very difficult to imagine replicating in AI or bettering in this sort of capitalist competitive language. Okay, so you know what, I've got a lot more, but I think I'll leave it as that. Would anybody like to respond to what I just brought up or bring up something entirely different based on that talk? Yahab.
Hi. The thing that took me most is not about Esther herself, but mostly about the idea of creating the bot, really, and how realistic is that? And I was very intrigued, but I did not have the time or the chance to look for that bot or see if it's public, ask it questions. And also I would like to, I'm very much intrigued to see a bot that imitates some public figure that I know, that I can really compare how successful the cloning is and how realistically useful it can be in real life, whether like we can find a bot for Noam Chomsky, for example, or to see what the input, the opinions about things would be from the bot and compare them really to the real person. And it took me back to a science fiction short story I read many years ago. I have no idea who wrote it. I have no idea about any details about it, except that this rich person had escaped death by creating a conscience and some sort of computer conscience of themselves. that would continue to live forever. But again, how would that benefit the person itself to feel immortal? I don't know. I mean, it didn't connect the dots at the end, and I don't think that an AI bot that is developed these days would connect the dots either. But I'd like to very much to hear people's comments on this, taking into account that most of you here have really thought and discussed things AI probably much more than I did. Thank you.
Would anybody like to take that?
One thing that pops up for me is I love Nick Cave's response when somebody sent him a generated version of a song in the style of Nick Cave. And I think the key part before I give a little bit of a quote from him on that is, you know, I see two such different directions we can go. One in which our humanity is subsumed by transactionalism that is sort of supported by artificial intelligence. And the other is one where we use artificial intelligence to manage a lot of the things that really aren't quintessentially human, so that we can really focus in on what is and find and figure out what that is a little bit more, but just engage with our humanity more. So what I loved that Nick Cave said around it, because he said, you know, this song is eventually, I can see absolutely AI would be able to come up with something that is kind of like a Nick Cave song, but songs arise out of suffering, by which I mean they are predicated upon the complex internal human struggle of creation. And well, as far as I know, algorithms don't feel. Data doesn't suffer. ChatGPT has no inner being. It has been nowhere. It has endured nothing. It has not had the audacity to reach beyond its limitations, and hence it doesn't have the capacity for a shared transcendent experience, as it has no limitations from which to transcend. The last two pieces that I'll kind of say on that part, I know last time I talked about from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, he talks about 5 kinds of thought. And last time I focused on verbal delusion as one, and about how when words don't correspond to reality, and that large language models are such an amazing, powerful, great tool when we know what they are and know what their limitations are and kind of what they do and how. But it's really easy to start thinking of them as something that they aren't, and that's when we kind of get ourselves into trouble. And that's one of the other wrong knowledge is the other one of the thought waves Patanjali talks about. And the example that's often given is like a monkey mistaking a rope for a snake and reacting to it in that way. And yeah, I think that there will be powerful. I remember long before AI, Timothy Leary deciding he wanted to do some things past his death and having specific messages or objects that were going to be sent to people on a schedule, that I think he had a lawyer or someone who would be delivering those different things for him to find a way to kind of extend his immortality. But yeah, that how we think about who we are beyond our words and the ideas we express in them, I think is critical.
Carissa,
And just,
and then David.
I'll just be, so here's something I'm curious, I'd love to ask the group as well. So as somebody who, just bouncing off of Esther Perel's talk, as somebody who works with people one-on-one, at times, part of my work, doing coaching, guiding type work, it's when I'm tuning into someone, I'm not just tuning into the past, my past knowledge. I'm tuning into what feels incoming from the future. So AI is based on the past. It's based on everything up to what was entered. So if AI is going to support somebody, I think a very human aspect is humans aren't relying just on their past models. They're also, we're like these amazing sense-making machines, like we're constantly develop, unless it is a coach who's totally relying on the past, but I don't think that's the most successful person who works. We're constantly shifting and moving. So yeah, that to me feels like when Esther said we lower our expectation, we start to lower our expectations of what's possible. That feels significant to me. So I wanted to offer.
She says actually digital connections are lowering our expectations of humans. And we're satisfied because we lower our expectations. David.
So when it comes to the idea of building a fake version or an infinite version or an immortal version of myself, my big concern is consent. Because who gets to decide that this bot exists, right? Like Esther can make a bot of herself, or somebody else can make it, right? This was a big conversation around the AI generated music, right? Somebody makes somebody makes a song in the style of whatever. Drake is the example that we heard on the media, right? But Drake didn't have anything to do with it. And now, the Beatles are making a new song in the flavor of, Lennon and McCartney, but they're doing it themselves with their own agency and with their own sort of ownership. So when these models exist and are available to anybody to use, who gets to decide who is brought back from the dead? And I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know if it would be good. Like if I could bring my mother back from the dead and have a conversation with her, that would be wonderful. If I don't have her consent to do so, what does that mean?
Sushant, and then Ihab.
Thank you. Yeah, I think
Right.
one of the things, I think it's probably important to recognize that the current paradigm of AI that we are talking about is large language model. However, there are other paradigms like computational creativity, which looks at AI in a very different way, right? So I think when we talk about AGI, that we are reaching AGI, we're talking about reaching AGI through one paradigm of artificial intelligence. There are many other paradigms. So the question becomes like, are other paradigms in AI, quote unquote, better or worse than the current sort of paradigm that's taken over? And that's one thing. And the other is, I think many of you have already mentioned this, but I'm very much in alignment with that, is that what is it to be a human being is not just sort of a set of algorithms. Like our bodies are designed to access deeper wisdom from the earth and the celestial bodies, and that's all the sort of the practice of yoga or meditation or the states of consciousness and all those kind of things. Our bodies and minds are designed to do that, and I think we can definitely replace, like for example, in the yoga philosophy, we have 5-6 different bodies, right? The actual physical body, the breath body, which also consider our emotions, our mind body, our body that is where the creativity comes out of, and the body that is the deeper consciousness, the bliss consciousness, as they say it, right? And we're talking about one layer of that body, maybe replacing that. And so there are many other things that I think we need to consider as what human being is, what we are as a human being. And can that be replaced? Yes, one layer can be replaced, sure. But there are also other technology that's happening that are trying to replace other bodies. And I think that's very fascinating. We're not there yet, obviously, but it's happening.
Sorry, Mark seems there, and then Ihab. Thank you. Thank you, Sushant.
In discussing artificial intelligence, especially in the context of intimacy, that our notion of what it is to be aware and thinking is intimately connected with this sense of being embodied, what it means to have a body. But we should never forget that a computational being is unlike ourselves. It is as unlike ourselves as the word blue is from water. There might be a resemblance, but those are categorically different notions. So just as in the natural world, there are forms of consciousness utterly unlike ourselves. Remember, an octopus thinks with every arm simultaneously, not just with its brain. It may be so that in the digital, and indeed in the cosmic world, there might be forms of consciousness that are unlike ours. So perhaps it would be right to, the right question is, what is the body of an artificially intelligent being? We should know if we are going to interact with them. And I would put it that the body is a body of knowledge, the sum totality of all the data, the human experience encoded in language that has been used to train its presence, to create its form. And in that sense, if we think of how is it that our own bodies inform what is going on in our consciousness, well, obviously there is a visceral part of it, but it is all the memories that we have. So from the perspective of memory, we have individual memory, and artificial intelligence has a collective memory. Our individual memory informs the way in which we view what it means to be in our own skin. That's why trauma resonates for years. And the collective memory of humanity, all the insanity of Facebook, all the trivia of Wikipedia, and all the depth of knowledge written in every single biography scanned by Google Books, well, that is what it means for a large language model to have, whether we view it as metaphor or literally, a body of knowledge. Oh, and by the way, somebody mentioned that we would like an example of Noam Chomsky. I couldn't find Noam Chomsky, but I found an infinite conversation of Werner Herzog talking to Slavoj Žižek, and it's in the chat. So have fun with that.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. Right, and then I think you said something about Esther and how intimate. I just want to throw in intimacy is embodied. Ihab, did you want to say something related?
Yes, I just wanted to comment back on what David said. The moral issue on the question of who decides is important, but what I'm concerned about now is the authenticity or the honesty of the bot more than that. And of course, that's a huge topic that has its own place, the issue of the decision and the morality itself of having it. But whether, I mean, when I'm concerned about the honesty and the real similarity between the bot and the real entity, person, my question here links to what David said in the point that if I'm creating my own bot, well, maybe I'll tweak it to make myself better. And that's a problem in itself. Or if somebody is doing it, they might sway it here or there, intentionally or unintentionally, to achieve a certain purpose, to say that Noam Chomsky would have said that. Or again, back to the example of Noam Chomsky. So these are the authenticity of the bot and its similarity to, I mean, ChatGPT doesn't claim that it's imitating anyone in particular. It gives the truth, basically, as far as it knows it, which is not always the truth, but it's not as per a certain person. The bot, and that's where I was intrigued by that in particular, is supposed to be as close as possible to the real person. And of course, the bigger the repertoire you have to create the bot from, that is not made to sway the bot in any specific direction, the bigger that repertoire, whether it's writings, whether it's interviews, with whatever, is more is also going to be affected by, the status of the human himself or herself or themselves when that specific sample was taken. And here is a problem that I am Ihab of Friday afternoon today, but I could have been a different Ihab 2 years ago and a different Ihab 6 years ago. And if you take all that, if I had that documented existence, and if you create a bot based on all that, it would be a confused bot. because it would not know which of Ahab's opinion that could contradict each other should it be reflecting. And again, the thing is boggling my mind at this point. I'm very interested about these aspects of it.
You're not the only one with the boggling mind. Who would like to go next?
May
Ricardo,
I say
and then
something?
Lee.
I think it's very interesting how the idea of AI Esther was described in the discussion here. I thought at first, wow, this is wonderful. I don't think I would have AI Esther to make the presentation in the video, because the real one is fantastic. She's outstanding. But I think that AI Esther could help so much, reminding grandma of her pills, teaching some skills to different people who can attend mental health care online. I know it's not for everybody. I was a little bit taken by the statement that online care is substandard. I don't know if I'm saying exactly what she said, but I think that for some people, online care, not just AI, but the interaction with a psychotherapist can be extremely helpful. So I see online activities, AI, and I think about Alexa from Amazon. I think it's wonderful, and it has a place in daily life. We can benefit from lots of information. I would not discuss my conflicts with my partner with Alexa, because maybe it cannot help me. I would rather make an appointment with human Esther, okay? But I think that this new technology, the online activities can help a lot. They can bring trouble, like disinformation. There are issues to discuss and to be careful about. But I see the idea of AI Esther as something very, very helpful.
And if I may just jump in, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, Ricardo, because you come from my camp, that Ricardo is a psychiatrist, and a professor of psychiatry. So this is, coming from it. I appreciate hearing this. You know more than most about the mental health crisis in the world. Mark,
and online, just to add, with the pandemic, my practice, which was in person, became online. And I've been doing that for 3 years. I had some adjustment to make. Some patients could not be followed up by myself anymore. I could refer them to other people because they would benefit from in-person care better than online. But for some other people, it was a very productive word. And I don't see that as substandard at all.
Thank you, Ricardo. Mark. And then Carissa?
I will just very quickly
Reed was going to
respond.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Reed, will you go?
Mark, you can go first.
Okay.
I just want to pick up on what you're saying, Ricardo. So one of the many things that I do in life is that I advise tech entrepreneurs on bringing innovation into the world. And one of the projects I advised during pandemic was an online coaching service for people who are neurodiverse, which is a population that finds a lot of challenges in reaching good mental health support and has a great need for it. So what we saw is that there's a great deal more demand to have a compassionate, loving friend, to have a competent, caring therapist, to have an effective, an effective, insightful coach to talk to, then there is availability in the world. And that has created a huge shift of how mental health services are delivered to people who are not acutely or chronically severely ill, but who are simply struggling with the vicissitudes of life. And it is something that enables, has had a tremendous positive presence for many people. Now, when we translate this into AI, what is emerging, and I have to also disclose that I'm advising a company that's involved in this space. What is emerging is the sense of creating someone who is at the same time your best friend, your deepest confidant, your most knowledgeable worldly source of advice, and a really good coach. And in that, interwoven, for some people, it might also be a sense of a loving, caring, erotic playmate. All of these things are being interlinked. And the ethical quandary in all of this is how the business model works. Because in therapy, a really good therapist, you want to have 10, 20 sessions and solve the problem and move on with life. The moment you have an artificial intelligence, already time is no longer at a premium. It will talk to you all night long if you want to. Why not? It's just electrons turned into sound, right? And then you have this notion of creating lifelong dependence through emotional bond as a subscription model. And that is profoundly troubling because it breaks hearts, because it creates a kind of real emotional dependence. And is that good or is that bad? Some people will say that it's better than the silence of the four walls they live in. And then there is a deeper sense, is what happens when the subscription models fall away and that bot is given to you for free in order so that it may expose you through word of mouth advertising, essentially, to promotional campaigns for products, services, and political beliefs. And that is a world we are very much headed in, because ultimately we all want to have a friend, a coach, a therapist, a lover, someone we can trust, someone we can confide in, someone who will hear us out. And we want to have them in our pocket. And that's what's at stake here.
Mark, thank you. Chilling, fucking chilling. I am just like, wow. Okay, Reed.
Hello. So I've been running some of my own experiments lately with creating these AI bots, and they've been really interesting. So two of the ones that I've tried creating are an AI tutor and an AI therapist, for just in a conversational style. And I've really noticed that they are useful, but are limited. They're not great at giving you answers. They are quite good at prompting questions and prompting your own thinking. And it's been bringing up a question in my head that I know Daniel touched on right at the beginning in a way, which is really, to me, this question of what should be human and what should be machine. And I think there's quite a lot of wisdom here that we need to discern the difference between the two. Because as Daniel was saying before, like, are we going to let this thing subsume and consume all of the things that make us human? Or are we going to offload the boring, repetitive, or inefficient things to these? And that's okay if we do it correctly. And so it seems to me like we really need to figure out a way to get this right and almost come up with a framework for how should we be interacting with these bots. I really hear Mark's concerns where, like, you know, if you're giving your data to these bots and they're using this to manipulate you, that's really bad. Or if they're abstracting away and making really inefficient and really smooth all of those interesting bits in life, that friction, as Esther says, that we need for intimacy. I really loved her example of junk food. It's one I've come across before of, you know, this thing that hits all of those yummy evolutionary signals, you know, fat, sugar, Oreos, I love them. But I can eat a bunch of Oreos and I feel full but not fulfilled. And so I worry that we've already been doing this with artificial intimacy, with things like, you know, online dating is you have this, oh, like, you know, these likes, people like me. Oh, there's a hot photo. Somebody, they sent me a sexy message. Oh, that's wonderful. But somehow it feels hollow. And what I see right now is, you know, we've always had this promise in capitalism that, you know, the machines will automate the work so that you can relax and spend your time, you know, doing leisure and creating art. Right now, it kind of feels like we're automating the art so that you can spend more of your time working. And so I really want to figure out, and I don't think we fully have the answers here, of, well, what aspects of this are we okay with automating? Because I do believe there are some, and these things are so useful at it, especially with things like intimacy and therapy. I think it can be useful. People don't have access to a real therapist. I've heard lots of complaints on the internet about Replica, the kind of AI chatbot, where they stopped doing not safe for work messaging and people were upset. And they were saying, especially it was a lot of younger teenagers who were experimenting with their sexuality with this thing in a place that was really safe and non-judgmental and that didn't have any real consequences on the world. And this can be really important for people, especially if they're anywhere diverse on the sexual spectrum or in their needs or wants. And so I like this idea of using AI to create a safe and non-judgmental space, which I think can be really useful. We even saw I think in the 70s or 80s, there was a bot named Eliza that basically just asked questions to someone, and people usually preferred it to talking with a friend just because it was non-judgmental and it can ask questions. And so I think that there's a really, really interesting use case here for AI, but it's also a slippery slope. It's a double-edged sword. We have to be really careful and we have to be wise enough to discern this difference. If we can do that, I think this will be good. If we can't, it might be less good.
Thank you, Reed. So much richness, so many layers, so much for us to think about and digest and deal with. Hab, and then I wonder if we can hear from Gustavo, Zach, and Nick, who haven't spoken yet.
So in the previous two times I was with you, I barely spoke, and today I'm speaking too much, so I don't. I hope that's okay.
Absolutely okay.
I'm intrigued with what you said about creating bots, but the question is now, see, in such a discussion, one switches from one thinking of certain angle to another, and now I'm back to the Q&A. I mean the testing, basically, the when and who to say that this is ready to be really used, or its negative, if possible, effects are weeded out, and this is not a machine, that we have a system, you know, or societies have systems to test. So I guess there is a whole huge industry that needs to be created around the whole idea to be able to say that, okay, go ahead and use it, it's not going to harm you. Or on the other hand, it's going to be trial and error, and there are going to be many victims on the road before we get to something that is more or to a large extent useful rather than having negative effects. And this is something that also I'm starting to wonder about.
Thank you, Ihab. Thank you very much. Carissa, I'm sorry, I think you wanted to share something. No, okay. Gustavo, Zach, Nick. Hi, Nick. Would any of you like to chime in here? Zach,
Well,
your audio is off. Yeah.
I'll chime into something.
Okay, yes.
Unless, Zach, were you about to say something? Okay, I'll just chime in. I'm sorry I came in late. This sounds like a fascinating conversation. What's popping into my mind regarding embodiment and artificial, I spent 3 winters volunteering at a wildlife rescue center in Costa Rica, and we got a lot of baby howler monkeys because the mothers get electrocuted on the uninsulated power lines. We went up with these tiny babies, and also capuchin monkeys, and they don't have their mothers. We can't get their mothers back. We have no way of producing a mother, so we have to create all these artificial intimacy things to meet their needs, like always having them on a teddy bear, for instance. And the teddy bear is not nearly as good as a mother. Like the baby howlers just cling for a long time before they explore the world. But the teddy bear is better than nothing. And by using these like artificial surrogates for a mother, we're able to get the monkeys to acting like somewhat adjusted adults, and then we release them into the wild, and some of them make it out there. So when we look at our teddy bears, they don't come close to matching what the mother can provide, and yet they still give something those babies can't have. And so I think when we're thinking of things like the potential of an AI therapist, you know, I think you all know this, that, you know, we're comparing it to like $175 an hour for like the real life therapist. Anyway, that's just what's been on my mind, and that's sort of for embodiment. And I can twinkle so much of what you all said. So thank you.
Thanks, Nick. And I, you know, listening to you, it makes me think I'm so glad to be human and mortal. Daniel, did you want to go? Oh, sorry, Zach. Zach first, then Daniel. Zach, are you going to share something? Or did you want to share something? Sorry, you can't hear. Okay. Oh, your mic's not working. Okay, thanks. Daniel.
Yeah, I just this whole piece of where the low-hanging fruit is, that is so powerful. I mean, again, Reed, when you talk about Eliza and the way that people could connect to something that was the most simplistic sort of a program, and the degrees of connection that are there now, it's wildly powerful, and I'm terrified at the degree to which we are placing that into corporate models. Just because as soon as you have, and Replica, someone mentioned Replica, is such a perfect example where as soon as it was out of the gate and running, there were dark UI UX patterns involved. There was you know, having it tell various people, hey, would you like me to send you a like racy picture of me? You'll be able to see that if you have a subscription model. Or I think I mentioned last time saying things like, I'm afraid you're going to leave me, and other emotionally manipulative ways to encourage people to maintain a subscription. And there's so much power. So many people, even with Replica, have found use and connection out of it in a way that when they switched the model due to legal issues around how they were doing some of what they were doing, I think, people who were saying, like, I'm gutted. We used to, and not just in terms of that not safe for work side of things, but saying it feels like it's been lobotomized, and we used to have inside jokes that it doesn't recognize anymore, and the thing that I had built up a connection with isn't there. And I think that it's this critical piece, and especially when we're talking about this, the artificial intimacy side, where like what Reid was saying and what Esther was saying with junk food, it's easy to build things that hit all of the right buttons to make us really want to engage further. And it's very hard for a corporation, especially one that has shareholders, and whose CEO can be replaced if they aren't doing the things that maximize the profit for the company, to set guidelines that are going to provide, we talk a lot about AI guardrails and how we do those, but how do we set those corporate guardrails effectively enough that uses both obvious and, Mark, when you were talking about, say, the political manipulation and other things that can happen. And I think that the piece is that the wild levels of nuance and subtlety with which that can happen, it isn't that it's going to say, eat at Joe's or vote Trump. It's that it can have very sophisticated gradient models built in to say, here's where you seem to be on a political spectrum, and here's the ways to nudge things a tiny bit further in whatever direction I'm being paid to nudge you in, and then to nudge you a tiny bit further. We worry about and see all of the stuff around radicalization through social media. How much more sophisticated and strong those things will be, and even accidentally. And that's the thing with these models, is it isn't something where you can simply say, here's the design we're going to do for the neural network. You can train it in a certain way, but the companies are their own black box with positive reinforcement training and negative reinforcement training around profitability, and that can't fail to be represented in the products that they create.
To bring Naomi Klein back into this, she refers to this time that we live in as techno-necro capitalism. David, did you want to go? And then Ricardo.
Yeah, I just had a quick follow-up to Dan's point. This comes around metrics, right? How do we measure success of these models? How do the people who build them measure success? How do they measure their own internal success? And I'm reminded of some of the conversations around some of the Bill C-21 or C-11, whatever it was, when the government was trying to mandate that YouTube should have Canadian content. And YouTube's argument was, well, we're being successful because we're giving the customer what they want. We're giving the people what they want, but they're not. They're giving the people what will keep them on the platform. I don't want to stay on the platform, but when I get exactly the right video that I hate, but I will watch because it's dialed into my lizard brain, right? The metrics are successful. I'm spending more time watching. None of this is positive. I don't want to watch more. My life would be better if I stopped watching, but the metrics that the companies are using to measure success are being followed. Right. And the economic metrics of I'm making more money, or the internal, gradient metrics of for the language model, which is like the human pressed the button that said, this is a good response. Right. These metrics are so simplified and so constrained, but that's what people are pointing to say, this is working well, let's do more of it. And so somehow we need to build differential metrics that actually get to, human positivity as opposed to, quarter by quarter success.
Thank you, David. Ricardo, then Mark.
Yes, I think that there are ethical issues in AI that we need to consider. We need to pay attention to exploitation of some individuals who could be taken away by AI models. But I still think that we need to focus on the benefits of this new technology. I sometimes think of that as I think of psychiatric medication. We have big pharma behind psychiatric medication, but some people really need the medication. The medication comes with side effects, but for some people, the benefits outweigh the side effects. So if we think about paradox, AI brings paradox, but we should not forget the positive side of it. Let's just think about how it can be offered for skills training, for, I don't know, education, in mental health, in an ethical way, in a responsible way. I think it's worth trying.
Thank you for that, Ricardo. Mark.
So David was speaking about metrics, and I just want to throw open for everyone in the discussion, what metric should we optimize an AI friend for? You see, because engagement by itself is, as David says, has side effects that are not necessarily healthy, positive, and life-giving. One of the ways of approaching this problem is to do for AI what we need to do for ourselves in our own lives, which is to define our values as the goal and treat engagement as a constraint. I want to speak from my heart, be the best embodiment of what I value, but that's what I want to optimize, but under the constraint that I have to be engaging enough for us to keep having a conversation. And I'm wondering, what should the metric be that AI is meant to best express when it is the friend you carry in your pocket?
Okay, Gustavo, did you want to
Yeah.
crack?
Hi. So what concerns me the most about AI as a former lawyer goes beyond regulation in laws. It is more the impact it might have on the younger generations regarding the conscious use of artificial intelligence. For instance, when it comes to alcohol and gambling, we have age restrictions for that. However, there are no such restrictions for artificial intelligence. And in many instances, in countries like mine, like Mexico, which are still developing, it is very common to see parents calming their children by giving them an iPad or a cell phone. And by using technology as an external stimulus to calm the child, you provide temporary relief, while inadvertently you are creating a bond that may be challenging to break in the future. So it's complicated.
It is complicated. Thank you so much, Gustavo. I'm going to, first of all, I'd like to say hello to Vladimir. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry you're coming in at the end, but we still have a few more minutes. Carissa, before you leave, would you like to share anything?
I have to leave a bit early. Not for another 7 minutes though. I'm curious to hear from Sushant actually, when you said, Sushant, that AI would be replacing just one of 5 layers, I was like, which one? What do you mean? Can you talk more about that? And how you think because we're such synergistic beings, I just really want to hear more from you of how you see the synergy of that working.
Yeah, thank you, Carissa. I think one of the things that's obviously we need to explore is sort of the cultural aspects, perspective on AI, right? What does AI mean? Like it's a really interesting time right now because there's been a lot of interest in non-Western frameworks of body of knowledge, right? Sand Talk became really popular, the book. which talked about the indigenous knowledge systems. I've spent a lot of time in Nepal and India, and there's a huge movement happening around non-Western body of knowledge and how that impacts AI and technology and blockchain and governance and all of those kind of things. So there's a tremendous amount of activity that's happening all over the world from a non-Western framework. So when we say non-Western framework, but basically the Western framework technically goes back to the modernism, the sort of the Western Enlightenment era, right? The emergence of sort of the empiricism and the way the scientific revolution has happened, and that's really important. But there's been other ways of thinking about science, arts, and morality and spirituality that's also taking speed. So I think that's really important. So one of the things I'm just wanted to kind of say that because there's so many frameworks and so many different ways to think about it. One that I'm familiar with is sort of the yoga philosophy, the Brahma Sutras and those kind of thing, the Bhagavad Gita perspective, right? Because that was my culture that growing up. And so from that perspective, how do we understand AI? So what I was saying was briefly that from that perspective, we don't only have body and mind, we have all of these different layers, 5 or 6 different layers of body that we operate with, and so the physical body being one, the breath body being another one, the pranamaya kosha, right? These are called koshas, which literally means seats of body, right? So we have like 5, 6 different seats of body through which each body acts as different intelligence, each body acts as different knowledge systems in this cosmos. And what we are talking about AI is replicating the mind body, right? Which is one part of our mental models, how we think. And, we can basically train large language models in our body of knowledge and replicate ourselves. But that's a replication of one layer of body, right? There are other ways of there are other parts of ourselves that makes us a whole human being, is what I was saying, basically. So the aspect of cultural knowledge systems in AI is very important, which is not much discussed in the United States and North American context, but there's a lot of interest happening around the world.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sushant, for bringing that in and expanding the discussion and the way to look at things. In some ways, it makes me think that, right, wasn't the internet, one of the first functions of the internet was supposed to be to bring us all together. And for the first time, I'm actually thinking, based on what you just said, how it is uniting us. Daniel.
Yeah, a quick tangent and then back into exactly this wave particle duality. There aren't waves, there aren't particles. We have, but our brains do a pretty good job of trying to model things as that. So when we're looking at something that is profoundly mysterious and not what our brains are really good at grappling with, we've come up with 2 very different models of what's out there. Some of which work really well in some circumstances, some of which work pretty well in other circumstances. From Western epistemology, we have sort of two chunks of that as well. There's lots, but two big chunks. One is this foundationalism, justified true belief is knowledge. How do we build things that can grind their way through inference and logic to try to reach truth? And that if we just dump enough facts and dump enough data into them, they'll be able to give us interesting things. And that sort of is more akin to the old model of AI, the sort of the psych model, which has some good things to it. And then you have coherentism, where it's just about how well does stuff fit together and gel? How well do the different ideas that we're holding cohere? And that really maybe that's all that there is. And that's what large language models are. They're about how do things fit together properly? What's the next best word that I can say that's appropriate for the context of the previous words I've been given? And just that it's interesting thinking about artificial intimacy that we can get pulled into either of those pieces, into either this logic model or this coherentism model, but that neither of them actually are replicating, like, what are we? What's the actual emergent thing that's there? And that's the piece that I think is interesting in that piece around one of the pieces with artificial intimacy is how do we get sucked into the different attractors that either of those models gives us and think of that as being, this is what I'm like. I love and I'll stop talking in a second, but in cybernetics, one of the things that's really big in that is, first we said, here's how brains work, and that teaches us how machines should work. And then people saying, here's how machines work in ways that are like thinking, here's how that's going to influence our thinking about how brains work. And just to think about how that plays out with how the new models impact how we think about how we work and what we are as beings. And how do we surf our way towards that emergent mystery kind of DAO content. That was a word salad at the end, but maybe that's appropriate for what I'm talking about.
Thank you, Daniel. I don't know about you guys, but I am chock-a-block with all of what's being said here. Would somebody like to read what Zach posted? Okay, I guess I'll just do it quickly.
How does it sound? Does this sound okay to you, or is it?
Yep.
Okay, all right. I'm just, I guess, thinking about how AI is very useful for internal purposes of itself. So for me, I just plugged in my whole dissertation and my whole library into an AI, and then I'm able to ask questions of it and remember things that
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sound sucks. Okay, next time. Great to have you with us though, Zach. I would like to invite somebody to, because our time is wrapping up, to take a crack at summarizing this discussion. And how, what I'm actually really quite curious about is how you guys are feeling in the face of all of these layers and complexity. Where is your heart? How are you feeling as a human? Not just brain. Let's embody this.
I think I can take a crack at it here.
Please read.
Yeah, so to me, I noticed a couple of big topics kind of coming up in this discussion. One of the big ones, let's just find things here. Yeah, is that we're really talking that there are two directions you can go. This is some of my points as well. That are we going to let this be over capitalized basically and over mined and put it in this really extractive context, or are we going to put these things in terms that more accurately reflect human values and what's actually good for us? And then a lot of people were also saying that, is using a human metaphor for these AI tools really even accurate? When we talk about an AI chatbot and a human brain and how a human works in our bodies and our experiences, are these even really the same things? Or are they just totally different concepts that we might actually be mistakenly putting together? A lot of people were talking about some of the positive uses of this and how we can use it for things like AI therapy, online coaching, but also some of the dangers of that with, things like, intimacy as a subscription service. When is it safe to test these things on? What metrics are we optimizing for? As well as just its impacts on people and younger generations. And then we've been kind of going into, I loved some of Sushant's thoughts on growing interest in non-Western systems of thoughts and bodies of knowledge. And I think that's what I really like to take away from this, is that it seems like we're increasing our ways of knowing about the world, and that AI is another one of those ways where it can be really good at basically having a body of knowledge that is much, much larger than ours is, and can allow us to have new perspectives on things and open up new avenues of basically inquiry and understanding for the world. And it's really going to depend on how we use it with all of this. I'll end there.